The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses with husband and wife real estate team Jennifer and Brian Frost. Everything you want to know about buying, selling, investing, and owning property. So let's get real about real estate.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Brian.
And today we're going to get real about FSBO, which stands for Sale by Owner. Before that, though, I just wanted to chat a little bit about what we've been up to. You spent the weekend playing hockey while I was selling a house.
Not working. Yes, I played in the Classic Pond Hockey Classic up on Lake Winnipesaukee. 200, I believe, over 220 teams participated. There were maybe 25 rinks. It's always a great time. I believe this was the 11th annual, and they have live bands, beer tent, all kinds of spectators walking out on the ice. The ice actually was only probably about 12 inches thick this year.
I know. I was a little nervous about that.
Yeah. In past years, you've had all kinds of trucks driving out there and whatnot, but they tried to discourage that this year. They even had the band tent up actually in the parking lot. But actually, everyone ignored that anyway and was out on the ice, and it was great weather. So.
Yeah, guys, alcohol, ice. What a perfect combination.
Hey, I'll take that any weekend over doing an open. No, I don't mean that.
Yeah, I had to handle the open house myself.
And you did a great job.
Thank you so much. Actually, Mike Petito from Harbor One Mortgage assisted me with that open house in your absence. So
yeah, he should have been playing with us. But go ahead.
Exactly. So for sale by owner, you want to sell your house yourself. We in the industry call you FSBOs, which is just the abbreviation of FSBO. I noticed that on Modern Family, the clown is named FSBO.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
And the husband, is it Phil, is a real estate agent.
Is, yes.
So somebody who's writing for that show must have some sort of real estate background.
Sure.
In my experience, there are three reasons why somebody would want to sell their house by themselves. The first is, and the one that everybody assumes, is to save money. But I also sometimes come across people who are doing it because they had a negative experience previously with a realtor. And the third category of person is somebody who says, you know what, nobody is going to care as much about this as me, and I want to take care of it myself.
Sure. Which
is almost your attitude when we would hire people to come in and do work on the house.
If you want it done right, do it yourself.
Do it yourself, exactly. So.
But do not sell your own home.
Okay, yeah. We're going to be a little self-serving on this podcast today because we obviously are in the business of selling houses. But
I mean, it may be right for some people.
It may be right for some people, right.
But not most, I would say.
Yeah. The number one question to me is, if you're saving money, who is actually saving the money?
Well, I think the thought is that if they're not paying a commission, they're already saving money.
So the seller thinks they're saving money.
Right, because they're not paying an agent a commission.
Right. And then the buyer comes in and says, well, we know you're not paying a commission, so you should be able to accept this lower offer.
Or else pay us half a commission.
Or pay for our
commission.
agent. Exactly. So I think a lot of times that savings gets negotiated right out.
I agree. I think most people looking for FSBO are also looking, they're bargain hunters. So
right.
They're expecting to get the property at a lower price. And the fact is that FSBOs do sell significantly lower than homes that are marketed by a real estate agent.
So you've got a stat on that?
Not really.
You just read it to me. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a stat on that.
Okay, sure.
So this is from a National Association of Realtors report put out in 2018. It says the typical for sale by owner home sold for $200,000 compared to $265,500 for agent assisted home sales. Now that's not the same home. We're not saying that somebody lost $60,000, but I think what it is saying is that it is more of maybe a fixer-upper or a lower-end home that is going to go for sale by owner because they're not exposing it to the whole market. So it may be that It's between family members. So you can have non-arm's length transactions that are for sale by owners. There's no
Sure.
realtor involved. And so there might be a friends and family discount in there. Or it could be a house that is in need of some work. And rather than put it out on the open market, somebody just says, hey, I'm going to put it out there. And then the investors and the contractors and the low ballers come and take it and flip it.
Right.
Which is, legitimate thing that
Yes.
happens. Interestingly enough, only 7% of home sales are for sale by owners. And that's a number that's been steadily dropping. It used to be 10%. And you would think with the internet and how much
Technology,
information that
yes.
people have available that it would increase. It's actually gone the other way. So in addition to saving money on the realtor commission, and as you said, they might save money on the whole commission, but if there's a buyer agent involved, that buyer agent is not being compensated by the listing agent, so they may be offered compensation from the seller. I see a lot of sellers who will say that, hey, we don't have an agent, but we're willing to pay the other side.
Right.
Or the buyer may ask for that in closing costs in order to compensate their agent. So
Sure.
I think one way or another, you're going to end up paying at least half the commission, if not the whole. And then you're going to do some advertising. We know you can go buy the signs down at Home Depot or where have you, but you're going to get some signs. It's time and hassle, though.
Plus, an experienced agent is going to know where to market, how to market,
Right.
what sites to market on,
Yeah.
how to get it out there.
How to get it out there. Yeah.
It's not just you just don't make a website, throw it out there, and everybody's coming to your door.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
So I have a true confession.
Sure.
I've had a couple of instances where we've met with a seller. We've given them a price on the home, so we know they're going to price it accurately because we gave them our analysis. And they said, you know what, and it's a nice home. It should, quote unquote, sell itself. And they put it on the market themselves. They wanted to try it for a couple of weeks, usually about 2 weeks. And in a couple of these instances, it didn't sell, and I didn't understand why. I was like, actually, that house might have sold itself.
Right.
But the exposure is so much different. The exposure is so much different when you have it listed with a realtor versus when you're advertising it yourself. Because we put it in our multiple listing service, we're marketing to other agents as well as to the public, and then it goes on all the feeds out to the wide world. We have that infrastructure all set up. The other thing that I've noticed when I've talked to people who have been marketing the home on their own is just the overall hassle for them of handling the calls, setting up the showings, having people not show up. That's an instance where when we schedule showings for the property, that buyer is usually working with an agent, and that agent has scheduled that, and we just don't get very many no-shows at all.
Exactly.
And we know already that they're pre-qualified and that they've met with a lender. So another way that I think the whole saving money thing might be a misconception is when it comes to setting the price.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going off Zillow or
Right.
whatever the case may be, they may be off significantly.
Right. So if you listen to our other episode on Zillow, what you would find is that Zillow claims their best accuracy is within 2.4%. So if you're saving 2.5% by not having your own agent, but you're pricing it too low, and then your buyer comes in and says, hey, we know you're not paying an agent, so we're going to come in a couple of percentage points lower. Did you really save any money?
Exactly.
I do have some people, or aware of some people who will use an attorney to handle the transaction once it goes under agreement. I have attorneys who actually refer them to us because they're like, it's cheaper to have an agent do this for you than for us to charge you by the hour.
By the hour, yeah.
So that's also interesting. It depends on how you want to handle that.
What do you mean? My neighbor's house sold for $340.
Right.
So mine's got to be worth $345.
Got to be worth, right, exactly. You had talked a little bit about who goes and looks at for sale by owners. So generally speaking, there's not a lot of inventory. So buyers are going to try to look at anything that meets their criteria. However, there very much watching certain websites. They're getting feeds from their agents. They're going to open houses. So they're looking in certain places. There are buyers who specifically look for sale by owners. And you had mentioned like an investor or a flipper. Definitely some lowballers will go out of their way.
Yeah, they're looking for a bargain.
They're looking for a bargain, and they figure, hey, the seller's saving money. I'm going to save some money. And they also know they're going to have less competition for that house because that house is not being seen by everybody. And the reason why I say that is there are some buyers that will tend to avoid going to a for sale by owner. Your first-time buyer generally wants to have an agent represent them because they're a little bit nervous about making a big decision. People who are relocating to the area and unfamiliar with the areas and the neighborhoods are definitely working with an agent. Also, they need to save time because they're in the middle of moving, and this is usually a job transfer, and they've got to focus some time on their jobs. Newer agents can be really great to work with buyers because they have a lot of time and energy, et cetera, to devote to buyers. They don't do as much on the listing side when they're newer to the business. So if they bring their buyer to a for sale by owner, they're going to need to negotiate their fee, and they're going to need to hold the seller's hand through the whole transaction. And so they might be a little bit intimidated.
A little overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed and not really pursue that. I'm not saying they won't show it, but they're not going to do a lot of research to go find a bunch of for sale by owners.
Yeah, they're not going to target them specifically.
Exactly. Another thing I'm going to chuckle a little bit about, this goes back to you. If you want it done right, do it yourself.
Sure.
When a homeowner is showing their own home.
Photos?
Oh, yeah. No photos.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, DIY photos. But when a homeowner is showing their own home, they have a tendency to say too much, to tell too much, to go on and on about a feature that they're especially proud of that the buyer is going to rip out, is absolutely not interested in.
As soon as I close on this, I'm tearing that out anyway.
Right. Whereas if I go through a home with my buyer and there is no seller present and there is no listing agent present, when we go through, I may know that they don't intend to use that formal dining room as a dining room. And so I can be talking to them about the potential of that room. Whereas if the seller is there, they might be going on and on about these special features in that room and actually turning a buyer off.
Right. And as a courtesy, you're not going to jump in and say,
no.
Right.
Right. And a buyer is not going to be very forthright with you about your own home.
Exactly.
They're not going to say to the seller, we hate this wallpaper. They will say that to their agent, and then their agent can talk to them about how easy that is to change and overcome that objection. So I think it's good to have a buffer.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Oh, I'm going to make a second confession. The house that we live in now, we bought directly from the owner.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. And
I also remember sitting in the basement talking.
Well, you were standing in the basement.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I was in the basement talking to the owner saying, oh, yeah, I'm just here to humor my wife. There's no way we're buying this house. And 13 years later or whatever, maybe 14 years later?
17 years later.
Is it 17?
Yeah,
wow,
17
time
years
flies.
later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you were really accurate. But, I'm a realtor. I'm in the business. I negotiate all the time. I price houses all the time. You're an appraiser. You price houses. But still, when I was negotiating directly with that seller with no buffer in between, it got very uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm sure it did. Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, I wish I had an agent to handle this for me.
And let's face it, that's really where you earn most of your money, your fee, your commission.
Absolutely.
Is,
yeah.
After it's gone under contract or negotiating that price. That's where you make your money.
Yeah. So the buyer and seller coming together is almost the easy price for the buyer to locate the right house and the seller to get the buyer to come see the house. The rest of it is, how do we agree on a price? How do we agree on terms? What's going to happen when we negotiate home inspection and repairs? What's going to happen during the mortgage process, the closing process, all of that. I do laugh when I'll see something on the internet about how, realtors are all going to go out of business. Nobody needs them. We have the internet. And I just think, why does my phone ring all day long with people asking me questions about the real estate transaction that they're in? It's because they need somebody who's been through it before. And the internet is not.
Yeah.
The internet will have lots of information, but how do you know what information is going to be applicable to your situation?
Yeah, I don't see very many houses actually closing if we all of a sudden got rid of real estate agents.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If it was just buyers and owners and buyers.
Yeah. Sometimes we, being the buffer, have to calm down some statement from one party before it gets presented to the other.
You know what the other problem is with the internet? The information may be valid from 20 years ago.
Right.
Right. So people are doing a simple search and often taking information out of context for the current market, for example.
Yeah, and geography as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
And different mortgage programs. So I have a few stats here. So 87% of buyers used a real estate agent. A seller might feel, hey, my house is going to sell itself, but a buyer wants some guidance. And so if the buyer is going to have an agent, you're going in essentially unarmed if you don't have an agent during the negotiation. So they have an expert advising them in the negotiation, and you don't. You represent yourself, which is not to say you might not do a good job. It's just you're risking it over a couple of percentage points that you might not actually save. It might get shaved off the top of the transaction anyway. Of those, of all the buyers, and this again is from that 2018 survey, 50% of them found the home they purchased on the internet. So they didn't need the agent to find the house for them. They needed the agent to do all of the other stuff surrounding it.
Which is very time consuming as well.
Exactly.
Stressful.
Right.
There's liability issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law, exactly. And that one of the most common questions that I get actually is this normal? Like, this is happening in my transaction.
Asking for something, or
yeah. So I'll have a buyer or a seller, and they're like, "This is happening in our transaction. Is this normal?" And I can say, "Yes, this is very typical. This is how it's supposed to go.
Don't worry.
Don't worry." Or I can be like, "No, this is very unusual. This is raising a little bit of a red flag for me, and we're gonna look into it some more." So,
You want to know my top reasons for using?
yes,
Sure.
Well, for me,
This is Ed, our producer,
Yeah,
by
it's
the way.
not even just about driving a better price for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't sell a house that often,
Right.
and so I'm going to sell. When I go to sell this house, the first person I go to is the real estate agent, because the attorney I used 25 years ago in a different place is probably no good to me. So for me, it's such great value to be able to say, okay, do you have an attorney you're comfortable working with?
Right.
Oh, by the way, can you put me in touch with a good mortgage broker?
Yeah.
And then on the other end, I've just gotten so much help and a good home inspector. I don't know home inspectors. So
Right.
all the referrals, and then
Yeah.
when the home inspection comes back and, they'll say, okay, we need this. Well, lots of times it's a tiny little electric job, and you're more likely to know somebody who's going to take that than me making 25 phone calls and scheduling people to come fix it that never show up.
Right, right.
You know?
And we also can look at that list of repairs, and I've been doing this for so long, 30-something years, that I know what's a $50 repair and what's a $5,000
And what's
repair.
reasonable and
Right.
what's ridiculous.
And
right?
if you need your septic replaced, I know people, I know the time frame. I've been through the process several times. I know how we can handle it within the whole mortgage with the buyer and what we might be able to work out and negotiate. And that's what you're paying for, is experience.
Experience, for
Absolutely.
sure.
Experience, contacts, knowledge.
And often you may want to guide your buyer to say, maybe we'll not ask for that since it's such a small item.
Right.
Right.
Let's just concentrate on the larger items,
Right.
more costly items.
And Yeah, I think that's particularly true with first-time home buyers. They think they're buying a brand new
Of
piece
course.
of well,
You're right. Yeah.
yeah, but there's a little mark over here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
We'll do an episode on inspections, but one of my pet peeves is when there's a laundry list of 12 items and 8 of them are something that could be just knocked out on a Saturday morning and are minor, and 3 of them are important, and you get the whole list. Well, the seller's going to say, I'll take care of all the little stuff, and they're going to ignore the big stuff.
Right.
When the buyer really should have just focused on the important things and only asked for that. Because then they've put themselves on the back foot in the negotiations.
yeah, and it is, for me, if I was going to go back with something from the home inspection, it has to be something that's make or break for the sale.
Correct.
Right. Not
Right.
a laundry
Significant, yeah.
list of nonsense.
Right. So this is interesting. So for sale by owner methods used to market a home, survey said 22% of them used a yard sign. That's smart. 18% of them networked with friends, relatives, or neighbors. Also smart. 6% used online classified advertisements. I'm thinking like a Craigslist type thing.
Well, I hope they're not advertising in a newspaper.
Well, you never know. 10% held open houses. 5% used a for sale by owner website. That's a very low number. 12% used social networking websites like a Facebook, a Twitter, Instagram. 4% listed their home on an MLS website. We'll talk a little bit about how they do that. 2% did use print newspaper. 2% did direct mail. 1% did video. And 49% did not actively market the home.
It's going to sell itself.
It's going to sell itself. My feeling is even if you successfully sell your home that way by not actively marketing it, good for you. But if you had exposed it to the wider market, you would have had more interested buyers.
And likely get a higher price.
You would definitely get a more accurate price if you exposed it to the wider market.
Especially in a seller's market where, it tends to bring it up to what the property is worth.
Right.
Regardless if you market it at a lower price.
Right. And then the for sale by owner sellers were also asked what tasks did they find to be more difficult. 17% said getting the right price. 12% said understanding and performing paperwork. 5% said selling within the planned length of time. 8% said fixing up the home for sale. That goes for all sellers.
Yes.
3% said having enough time to devote to this whole project. So paperwork, pricing, timing, this is really what we get paid for because we know it, we do it every day, and we do it under a lot of different circumstances. The other downside I'm going to tell you is if you put your home for sale by owner, the number one source of calls is going to be real estate agents trying to list your house.
There you go.
You will be inundated with calls. And there are services that will track as soon as a for sale by owner is listed online, then they will match up the address to the name of the owner, to the phone number of the owner, and they sell that on a subscription basis to realtors. So at 7 a.m. every morning, there are a group of realtors who get that information and they start dialing because they know A, you're looking to sell your home, and they know B, within probably 2 weeks, you're going to be listed with an agent. So they want to get their foot in the door. And that makes for some very cranky sellers.
I could see that.
Exactly. So that one of the reasons, and the main reason we talked about, was saving money. But another reason why people will list on their own or sell on their own is because they've had a negative experience with an agent. They felt, last time I had an agent, they didn't do what I wanted, they didn't communicate well, they didn't listen to me, what have you. And that's a legitimate reason, right?
Of course. I mean, no one's perfect. And
right.
It might have been an inexperienced agent, or it might just be an agent that they didn't feel comfortable working with.
Exactly. So in that case, I would say rather than throw out the baby with the bathwater, maybe spend some time interviewing agents, getting recommendations from friends.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that one negative experience is not necessarily indicative of the fact that you should do it yourself. Then there's people like Brian who say, nobody's going to care about this as much as me.
It's true.
Yeah.
Engineers,
Yes.
in particular.
Yep, definitely, definitely. So I usually find those are great sellers for me to deal with because they take a lot of care and time and effort. They also tend to be the type of seller who will overestimate the value of their house. And so they might be getting good exposure because they're making all that effort, but they're out there at the wrong price, so they're not getting any action. Or they tend to be the ones that will overdo it when they're showing the home and just have so much pride in their home that the buyer can't see themselves in that property. We also will see some non-arm's length transactions, a friend, neighbor, relative, purchasing a property, and they can, as I said, get an attorney to facilitate. They can also get an agent to facilitate. This will be my third confession. So for a flat fee, I have assisted people with private sales where I just come in and do the transaction part of it, the paperwork part of it, for a flat fee. So I'm not listing the property, I'm not marketing the property, I'm not representing anybody's interests, I'm not doing the negotiations, but I'm helping people with that part that they really want somebody to walk them through.
Just making sure the paperwork is all done correctly.
The paperwork and the dates, exactly, the transaction itself. You can also, if you're a for sale by owner, use what's called a limited service brokerage. And that is where you list with a real estate company, but the real estate company's only role is to be a member of our multiple listing service, put the property in multiple listing. So usually when that's done, there is a fee that's offered to the buyer's agent. So again, you didn't save the whole commission. Then there's a fee to the limited service brokerage for them to get it in MLS. And then they will have an add-on menu of if you want photos or signs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And it'll say contact the owner for any information.
Right. And so our instructions as the agent is that we're going to deal directly with the homeowner in regards to showing the property, making an offer, negotiating an offer, et cetera. And I have done that. I'm perfectly willing to do it. But I do know it's more work for me because I'm holding that seller's hand during the transaction while I'm representing the buyer. So I'm not representing the seller's interests at all. I'm just walking them through everything. It's important if you are selling on your own that you understand what your local laws are and requirements regarding property disclosure, that you know lead paint law, that you know fair housing law, that you have access to the forms in the process, and that you understand the mortgage process and negotiating repairs.
And pay a professional to take photos.
Well, you're giving all our secrets away.
Well,
no, use your iPhone.
use your flip phone.
Use your flip phone. So, in short, there's a variety of reasons to do a for sale by owner. We believe that we add enough value to the transaction that you more than pay for. The realtor role more than pays for itself in the transaction. But there may be circumstances where you don't want to go out on the open market, or you did just happen to hear about a property, through a friend or a neighbor, and you've got a private sale. You actually still could use a real estate agent to help you with just the paperwork part of it.
Well, if you're a buyer, you definitely want an agent.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. If I was buying in a state or a town that was unfamiliar to me, I would 100% use an agent, even though I've been in the business for over 30 years.
I agree.
Yeah.
Worth every penny.
Worth every penny. So that's it for Getting Real about For Sale by Owner. And thank you to Ed at Studio 21 Cafe. And we will see you next time.
Music courtesy of the Eric Lindbergh Trio. Please visit his website at www.ericlindberghworld.com. Jennifer and Brian are licensed to practice real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Brian is also a certified general appraiser in New Hampshire. They are not lawyers, accountants, home inspectors, or therapists. Real estate customs and rules may be different in your area. Each Keller Williams Realty office is independently owned and operated. The Realtor name is trademarked to members of the National Association of Realtors. If you are currently under contract with a real estate agent, this is not intended as a solicitation. Views expressed on this podcast by Jennifer may not be shared by Brian and vice versa, nor are they necessarily the views of Keller Williams Realty.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.